Bitcoin rally stirs Bank of America alarm on enormous surge in energy use. And we talk about energy use all the time. We know this is a red herring. This is nothing to worry about for Bitcoin. Even today, a company called Argo Blockchain launched a hydropower only, yes, a renewable Bitcoin pool where Bitcoin can be generated, shock, from clean hydropower. Many cases, it's difficult to have batteries, which are expensive, near hydro dams, and transmitting power over great distances, you lose power. So instead, you could store that power in Bitcoin right there at the dam. Hydro energy never stops, it runs all the time. So it's really sensible. We understand what's happening there. But what I think is what's important about this article is that it's Bank of America, a competitor to Bitcoin, who is warning you about the enormous use of energy in Bitcoin. So, Dan, Eve, the banks are warning us that a competitor uses too much energy. Should we be greatly concerned?
Well, I'd just like to point out that actually, Bank of America were in the top four of the top banking companies that invested 3.8 trillion into fossil fuels over the last since 2015. So that's a lot of money that's going into fossil fuel usage. So for BAM to sit there and be like, oh, Bitcoin, bam, 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 and whilst they're literally in the background, like, plugging away fossil fuels, it's a bit hypocritical, really. And obviously, you point out it's a competitor. They're not gonna, they're sitting there crapping themselves because they're making so much money out of remittance. And let's face it, banks dominate the money laundering markets. They absolutely smash money laundering. That's why they get fined all the time, and there's so many fines. It's only because Bitcoin shot up that we no longer have the comparisons of like, oh, HSBC laundered 5 times the amount of the whole Bitcoin market cap last year, or whatever. That we don't have those stories anymore because Bitcoin's grown so much. But what we do have now is just the eco fund, and that's basically it. And I think it's really good to see companies that are taking advantage, but pointing out where they're being green and using excess energy. The things that the technology that we have to store excess energy from wind power and whatever isn't fantastic. There's all sorts of crazy things, from gravitational batteries where they lift a huge weight up in the air during excess energy, and then it just slowly drops back down and grinds some gears and whatever. Or pumping water uphill, really abstract, odd things where, like, let's just pump the water uphill with the energy while it's here, and then we let it flow back down again into another reservoir. So yeah, I think whilst they're struggling to find ways of storing this energy, the most logical thing, full stop, is to use excess energy from renewables. And that's, again, a lot of research is showing that Bitcoin is centered around excess energy from renewables because it goes cheap. Otherwise, it goes to waste. If you can't use the electricity, if you can't send it miles across the land, and there aren't homes using it, then you might as well have something there using it and not wasting the electricity. So if anything, Bitcoin is like an electricity wasting sponge that turns it into something valuable. So yeah, I think it's going to spur on a lot more innovation into green tech than we're hearing, and hopefully that's going to counter a lot of these arguments with a boatload of evidence soon. At the moment, you've got kind of sporadic projects that are doing things, and it's not so mainstream, that information. But the more companies that do it and put their green badge on, then yeah, I think it's going to be easier to combat that eco sadness.
Well, I agree with Dan. When I think of environmentalism, I think of Bank of America. Josh Shigala.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered this topic so often on the show. It really is ridiculous, and I don't know what else to say about it. That when you're trying to when you're trying to find the answer to a difficult puzzle, and it's going to cost you a lot of money in power, you try to find the cheapest power you can, and the cheapest power you can is in the renewable sector. It really is. When there's heat coming out of the earth and you can capture it, when there's water running down down a river and you can capture it. It's just constant and on. When there's waves moving up and down, and when you have excess power at nighttime, you got to do something with it. And if you can mine some Bitcoin, and there's countless stories of energy companies mining Bitcoin at nighttime. During the day, and sometimes at nighttime too, where there's excess power. And so it's just one of these things where Bank of America, I don't know. It's just one report. I don't know if they've actually seeing Bitcoin as some sort of threat or whatever, but usually banks are cleverer than that. They would see something that's investable and buy into it. I just think it's this typical talking point from people that like to bring this topic up ad nauseum. And look, Elon Musk's entire world, the thing that gets him to work so freaking hard, apparently, is that he wants to save the world from fossil fuels. That's his thing. Yet he's now buying Bitcoin. So what does that say? He's not a dumb guy, right? He's thinking about it, and he comes to the same conclusion that we come to every second show when we talk about this, is that they, the best way to mine Bitcoin is with almost free energy. Not free. I mean, obviously there's no such thing, but energy that's in excess.
Well, I definitely think we covered a lot, Josh, but I think it's because it's important, and it's because Bank of America is using propaganda. And the only way to counter propaganda is to use more propaganda. So that's all we can really do, is say again that yes, PlayStations, video game systems that are on but not really on, they use more power than Bitcoin. Christmas lights use more power than Bitcoin. And most importantly, it's just this kind of general fallacy where it's very easy to estimate Bitcoin's energy usage. It's like if you had a little meter and one thing has a meter, and you could say, wow, Bitcoin's using 110 today. And the other thing with the banks, they're also using energy, but you have to add up all these different things and do all this work to figure out, how much does a person in an office cost? How much does an office building cost? How much does terrible investment strategies that hurt the world and hurt people and other things like that cost? And you have to add all that up to get the number. And it's so hard. Like you work on that,
trucks that drive from ATM machine to ATM machine.
Trucks, ATM machines, the armored cars, the cost of printing, the paper in the office, all these things are waste products of the bank. But you'd have to write a dissertation to get that knowledge. Whereas Bitcoin, you just look at the number and you're like, oh, it's at 120. That's more. This is so much more. And the banks are also using power.